Hello, this is Eric Bobrow, and in this series of ArchiCAD video tutorials, I'll show you how to take your ArchiCAD 3D model beyond the creation of working drawings. You'll learn how to generate detailed specification reports using standard interactive schedule tools, and associate BIM data inside each element to make it easy to annotate your drawings in a consistent and efficient manner. In this project by UK architect Tim Ball, we see the floor plan and 3D view of his model, as well as the standard layouts with plans, elevations, sections, and schedules such as this interactive window schedule. Now, in addition to standard interactive window schedules like this, there's also a special type of schedule that Tim has generated for specifications. So using the same interactive schedule tools, it reports on other types of elements, in fact all the 3D elements such as walls, roofs, slabs, all organized into categories such as masonry, carpentry, roofing, etc. Now, this interactive schedule that we see here includes standard windows, doors, and other objects that you put into normal schedules. Let's take a look at how the information is compiled for this. Here's L1001, double glazed window with some information and workmanship notes, data that's associated with that particular type of window. Here we have a detail drawing with this window included. Let's open up the section that this detail comes from, and we'll look at this in an enlarged form. You'll see here this window with a label describing it. Now, this label is not just put in simply by itself, it's actually attached to the window and displaying the information directly part of the window in the project data. So here's the window in the info box. When I open up the tags and categories, you'll see here's that L1001 also repeated down here as the name. We have the double glazed window, which we see as a drawing note on the section. And here is that general description, the text that we saw in that specification schedule, as well as the additional notes for workmanship down below. Now, in ArchiCAD 19, some new capabilities have made it straightforward to do automatic labeling not only for windows, but for slabs, walls, complex profiles, etc., and to report all of them in the same type of interactive schedule to create a specifications report. In this tutorial, I'll show you how you can create your own specifications reports and automatically label your elements based on the same information throughout the project lifecycle, making your project data-rich and consistent and much more efficient to manage. So let's look a little deeper at the relationship between interactive schedules and specification reports and automatic labeling of elements. In the window schedule that we looked at earlier, we can select a window and then ask for ArchiCAD to highlight it on the plan. It will then select it and zoom to it. Let me go back here and look at the window schedule and say there's an L1001, there's one of them that's a certain size, and here's another version that's a little bit of a different size. And I can select that and it will zoom out to show me those 4 windows there. Now, those were standard interactive schedules for Windows. Let's take a look at the specifications report that we were looking at earlier. So we right-click on it and say Open the Source View, which opens up the interactive schedule with this specifications report. It takes a little while because this is one of the areas that ArchiCAD really has to plow through all the data in the project to bring up a live report on the information. But the trade-off is that although it takes a while to bring it up, it's always accurate, always current, and always consistent with every other view of your model. The specification report has now come up, and we're seeing the live view where we can select individual elements and edit them. I'm going to scroll down to where we can find the windows that we've been looking at and point out that there's only one entry for L1001 because all the windows of that type, regardless of size, have a similar description in terms of installation and workmanship. I select this and go ahead and ask for it to select it on the plan. And you can see that now there are more windows selected than before because all of these, regardless of size, have the same note, the L1001, and the same information about them. Now let's zoom in on this particular area here and point out that the L1001 in this case is being displayed with a dimension marker. The dimension marker is pulling the same information as the label in terms of the ID of the window. And you can see these 7 windows on this story all have the ID L1001, along with tags and categories information that have the notes that we were seeing earlier. Now, what if we wanted to label something on the plan in a similar style to what we had before on the section? So let's go back to the section here. Then what we're going to do is eyedrop the label style. So I use the eyedropper and click on that. It now sets up to draw labels with this particular style of information. Let's go back to the plan view here and go click on the window. We'll just say show the layer here. You can see that it's put that L1001 double glazed window. So that's a label. Let's go click on a wall like this and we'll see that it labels the wall. Now this label here, I'm going to drag down and then perhaps change the style so that it's a little bit clearer for my purposes. I'll go and just change the leader line to a curve, which makes it a little bit easier to see what it's pointing to in this particular case. So this information that is used to label any type of element is set up in the label tool in ArchiCAD 19. Now if I select the wall itself, we'll see that this wall has that information. The timber frame wall brick face is part of the information that we're seeing here, the drawing note for this particular wall. So where does one get this type of facility to be able to place drawing notes and workmanship and other data for these elements? After all, in a standard ArchiCAD project using the base template, there's no place to put these notes for walls or other non-library part elements. To understand this better, let's switch to a standard ArchiCAD project based on the US template. In the standard user interface that Graphisoft sets up when you first install ArchiCAD, the info box runs across the top, and in order to see all the information about elements like the wall tool, you need to scroll over to be able to have access to it and to see the tags and categories as well. Now in ArchiCAD 19, it's possible to rearrange these palettes very flexibly. So I'm going to press down on the title area of the info box and drag it and reposition it next to the toolbox. This allows me to see the entire range of information for an element without having to scroll, including the tags and categories. Now in this simple project based on the US template, we'll see a door schedule. And in this door schedule, there are fields for variety of data and information that we would want to compile and present as part of the schedule. I'll select one of the doors and ask for ArchiCAD to highlight it on the plan. When I open up the door settings, I can see that in addition to the basic geometry information, that in the graphic user interface under descriptions are a set of fields that are used for the schedule. This used to be called listing parameters, Now it's called descriptions, but the functionality is pretty much the same. And you'll find this in common for Windows as well as many of the library parts in the standard library that you would typically put into interactive schedules. In contrast, when we go to a wall and select it, we'll find that the wall settings, that there's no information, no place to put the information that you might want to put into a specifications report. It's not showing up in this floor plan display or the model options here, and under tags and categories there's very limited space for any information to be put in. So how do you add this in to your model? How do you add it in to your environment so you can create a report that includes walls, floors, roofs, and other construction elements beyond the ones that are provided in the library, like doors, windows, and objects? So to extend ArchiCAD's capability to hold on to data and use it for things like drawing notes as well as specifications reports, we're going to work with something called IFC fields. To understand this better, let's talk a little bit about what IFC properties mean and what in fact IFC is about. So IFC stands for Industry Foundation Classes. It's a file format for sharing intelligent building models between firms and between disciplines. So we can take, for example, an ArchiCAD 3D model with a lot of information in it and share it with a structural engineer working in another tool like Revit or Tekla, things like that. And vice versa, if we have a mechanical model with venting HVAC that we want to import from some other tool and they give it to us in an IFC format, we can bring that in. Now it'll bring in the geometry, so the shapes and forms of things, as well as quite a bit of the data being descriptions and categories and classes and things like that. Now IFC is designed to be a very general format, so you can actually extend it to make it work better for any particular use case. So, for example, working between two different firms, you may find for certain projects that you want to add to the IFC properties that are available for the elements. So when you save out your model, it includes that information for the structural engineer or perhaps for other types of analysis, building code or energy or egress, all sorts of different types of analysis. Now what we're going to do is use this IFC capability directly within ArchiCAD to add some extra spaces for information. So here's how you can get started with this. We go to the File menu, File Special, IFC 2x3. So IFC Industry Foundation Classes 2x3 is one of the more recent formats. It has gone through a number of different generations there, sort of like ArchiCAD 19 is the most recent version of ArchiCAD. And in the submenu, you'll pick IFC Scheme Setup. Now when I do this, it brings up a dialog box that at first is very, very confusing. What am I looking at? I'm seeing a whole long list of things and some stuff about them. Now, as I click on it, it says, okay, IFC objects. They have some information here. I can open up stuff. Okay, so there's objects can have some risk and cause of risk. So maybe if you're talking about fires or other types of vulnerability, this may be where some information goes in. Now what we're going to focus on is the IFC element area. So we're focusing on elements within the building model. And these elements include various types of fire rating. So you can see there are some options for putting in fire resistance or whether something is combustible. Now, this is elements in general. You'll notice that underneath elements there's beams, there's doors, there's all the standard components, walls, etc. Now as I click on each one of these, you'll see that some different things come up. Now if I look at, for example, the window, that there are some information things here that are specific to windows that aren't seen in walls. For example, there are going to be things that have to do with the glazing of the window that don't apply to most walls, etc. Now, what we're going to do here to make it simple is just focus on the one thing that you'll need to do to add in this capability for automatic labeling and for specification reporting. And that is to go into the IFC element area here and go and say you want to add a new property or classification. So what does that mean? It's going to create a new field reference that we can put some information into. So I'm going to go and say that I'd like to create a new property or classification and organize these here in a way, let's say, I'm just going to call this BCG, that's my company here, Bobrow Consulting Group, and just put that as the set that this is under. And then I'll call this drawing note. So what is drawing note? This is just a name for a field. You recall that we had the note that said double glazed window or timber frame wall. It could be used for a short reference that would show up on the drawing as a note. So I'm creating this particular new field but simply by naming a property set and a property name and saying OK. And you'll see that it's now got BCG in bold and drawing note below it. I can open and close it. You can see that it is within this BCG. Now I'll go and create another one, new property classification. It remembers that I was working in BCG, and we're going to be doing this, let's say, as description. So we can create as many of these as we like. I'll just say OK, and you can see there's now a description and a drawing note. So let's now say OK and see what happens when I want to describe this wall. So when I select this wall here, and I'd like to put information like what would be the note that would go next to the wall. What type of wall is it if I were to label it in plan or section or elevation, etc. Well, if I go into the wall tool and I look in the tags and categories under IFC properties, there's an option for manage IFC properties. And if I click on that button, it'll bring up this confusing dialog. However, if I look just at the information that I need, it's not so confusing. You'll see that BCG stands out from the rest and that there is the description and the drawing note. Now if I click on the description with the check mark and I fill in some data, let's say we'll call this exterior wall type 1, and then we'll say drawing note, and we'll say wall type 1. Okay, so the drawing note in this case is something that would I'm intending to be on the drawing. This one would be the description, and maybe we'll make it a little bit here, masonry with stucco veneer, something like that. Okay, so I've just given it a description and a note, and I'll say OK. Now you'll notice that down below here, this text is available, and when I say OK, with this wall selected and I go to tags and categories, here's that information. So I have now created a place where I can add that information to any wall. Let's just go look at another wall and say, do this interior wall and go to tags and categories. You'll notice that it's not available here, but if I open up the wall dialog, go into Manage IFC Properties to BCG, and we go to Drawing Note, and we'll just call this Interior Wall A, so something like that. So this is a drawing note. So we can add this fairly rapidly by selecting one or possibly several elements. In fact, I can eyedrop this wall and I can then inject it into this other wall, so now they have the same note. And I can eyedrop this wall and say inject it into the other ones that are similar. So now if I select any of these and go in here, you'll see the information has been carried across. Now let's go to the section and open this up. So the section right now has this wall. If I go to the wall here and I look at the tags and categories, you'll see that it has all of that information displayed. So simply by creating a new field using that IFC Scheme setup, I can add that information. Now how do I label it? Well, in ArchiCAD 19, the label tool has a variety of options. These are quite different than previous versions of ArchiCAD. You notice that there's a plain text label that we can just put anywhere we want, just type in any text we want. There's one that automatically, when it's associated with an element, will show the ID. There's another one for the unique ID, which is pretty rarely used, but for some special purposes might be important. There's certain things for dimensions of openings, names of composites or profiles, etc. But let's look at the one called tags and categories. Now tags and categories is one that we can then set up carefully to show. Remember that these were under tags and categories. So I say OK, and I'll go click on this wall. Now when I do that, because I hadn't set up anything specific, it's showing all of the information that's under the general subject of tags and categories. But look down here. Here's that wall type 1, and here's the exterior wall type 1 masonry with stucco veneer, and description and drawing notes. So this label, which just sort of looks like a block of text, is actually associated with the wall. You can see that when I selected it, highlighted the wall briefly. Now let's set it up so it's more similar to what Tim Ball was using. I'll select this, go into the label settings, and under tags and categories we're going to go to symbol label. And the symbol label gives us controls over this particular symbolic label. And it says select parameters, display all. Well, perhaps we don't want to display all. We want to create a sorting. And you can see now it has some options for what it's going to display down below. So it changed quite a bit from the display all. Now we'll actually have an easier time if we look under custom settings, because the custom settings here are designed to make it a little bit easier to select. So here's that create sorting versus display all. And let's go to the first row here, and you notice that it gives me a choice of various information. It was showing everything before, but now let's just go to drawing note. All right, so I'm saying just show the drawing note. It says show parameter name and value. Let's see what that does. When I say OK, it says drawing note, wall type 1. Well, maybe we don't really need the words drawing note. So I'm just going to go back in and set this up so that it's only going to show the value. Here we go. Here's wall type 1. So now I have a label that if I use this as the settings, if I say option, if I eyedrop this here, and then I go and click on another wall, you see it says wall type 1. So it's the same style. Now if I wanted it to have an arrow or something like that, then I can select this label and perhaps turn on the leader line. And you can see here the leader line with a curved segment. So we now have a style like this. So let's just set up a favorite for this and a favorite for that, because sometimes we might want one, sometimes the other. So I'll go into the label settings and I'll go to favorites, and we'll just say save current settings as favorite, and we'll call this let's say description with leader. And then I'll go into this one and do the same thing. with favorites and say description no leader. So these are now two different favorites. Now the favorites can be accessed this way, of course, but I can also bring open the favorites palette under the window menu, palettes, favorites. And when I have this floating around or docked, I can then go select this one here and double click description with leader. And you can see how it switches, or description no leader. So I can easily have whatever type of label settings that I like. Now the one that we were seeing with Tim Ball was set a little bit differently. If I open this up, we can go in here, and this was set to have the drawing note and I believe the description. Or actually no, it had the first one was the ID and the second one was the description. So here we have the ID A, this is wall type A, and here's the description. Or I think actually no, it was the ID and the drawing note. There we go. So that's what he was showing. So that's how easy it is to set up the labeling. Now we could go to any element. For example, if I eyedrop this and click on the roof. However, the roof right now doesn't have a drawing note. You can see that it's got an ID, but it doesn't have drawing information. Let's go to the roof and see how we add that. Now under tags and categories, you'll see that there's no information here that we can add. But if I go to the roof settings and scroll down under tags and categories, I can go and add the same information here. So we'll just say drawing note, and let's say composition roof. So whatever note you'd want. Now I'm putting this into the roof. That means when I go OK and we select the settings here, and it says ID, let's just switch this to, let's just switch this to show the, under the second one, the drawing note, and let's save that as a favorite. So we're going to go, this is going to be ID plus drawing note. So now we can switch this. You can see how this is now a setting, and we can go and change these very, very quickly by double-clicking on them. There. So we have the ability to add information to any type of 3D element that would then show up in the label tool, and we can then label this in section or any view. If I go down to the floor plan and I go, let's take the ID and drawing note, and I click on the roof here, you can see the same information shows up. Now if I were to select this roof and go here and say this is a Spanish tile there, then you'll see that the note changes here, and of course, as you would expect, when I go to that section, this also changes. And as you would expect, it will show up in the schedule, the specification schedule. So how do we create a specifications schedule for this type of context? Well, let's go into the schedules. Let's say just open any of the schedules and go to Scheme Settings. And in this case, we're going to create a new schedule. So we're looking at a door schedule. We have window schedules and other things, but we don't have one for the specifications. So I'm going to create a new one, and we'll just give it spec 1 here, and we'll call this specifications. All right, so this is the beginnings of this process. We're going to create a new scheme. It's going to be reporting on construction elements, so generally 3D elements within the project, as opposed to components or surfaces, which are other types of reports that you can do. When I say OK, first it says it's going to report on walls. I say, no, 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 please be more general than that. All 3D types, or let's just say all types that you can report. Let's see what happens there. Now we have to go and add certain fields. So what are we going to do? Let's go add, and this is sort of basic stuff for ArchiCAD. We can say that we'd like to show the element ID here. And perhaps we want to say what type of element it is. In other words, is it a wall or a slab, etc. So we'll go to the one that's called type here. Now, in order to get access to the information that we were just talking about, the drawing note and the description, instead of clicking the Add button, we go to the little triangle and press down where we can say Add IFC Properties. So when I click that, now I have access. Here's that BCG grouping, and we can go here and say I'd like to add the drawing note and the description. I can actually select more than once and add them. And maybe I want the drawing note first. So I'll just drag it up, and then the description. So now when I say OK, we'll see that it's got a list of the elements in the project with some information. It needs to be formatted a little bit, so we'll just open this up. And maybe when I click in this area, we'll just go to the formatting, and we'll say that we wanted to wrap the text here. Okay, so it is wrapping the text. Let's go and just change our height for this to a little taller. There we go. So now it is working a little better, and we'll just take the title here a little bit taller as well, and then close this up here. So we're getting the beginnings of that specification schedule. We're seeing walls, doors, roofs, etc. all listed. We have the option to put in some drawing notes and descriptions that couldn't have been done without the IFC field, because you don't have an option for walls and other standard generic 3D elements. You only have elements for the library parts, doors, windows, and objects for what conventionally has gone into a schedule. But with the IFC fields, we can now add them to all of them. So if I go to the door, here we can say this is exterior door, and this is double door here. So now I'm putting this information in, and if I select it on the plan, you'll see here's that door. When I go to tags and categories, here is that double door and exterior door, and you can see they're in the field reference that I created. So it's now starting to all tie together in a way that's very similar to what we saw with the original project. We've got spaces for compiling information. We have the ability to set up labels that display that information, and the ability to generate a schedule that compiles that information. Now if we go to that schedule here, and we just created the specification schedule, we can do some more formatting and sorting. So a common thing that we may want to do is to group them in certain ways. So if I want to say that the type, let's go to organize it first off by what type of elements. So we're going to say we'll list the walls first, or the doors first, and then roofs, and then walls, etc. So we organize by type, and I can go and put a little flag here. Actually, I guess what we'll do is we'll organize it by type. So you can see now it's going to have doors, roofs, slabs, walls, etc. And then I can go and say show a headline. And so when I say show a headline, the simple case, it's going to just take this first field, the type, and put it as the headline. So now we can see all of these grouped together. A specifications report can get quite elaborate, and in the next section of this ArchiCAD video tutorial, I'll show you how you can achieve the same results as Tim Ball did, where things are organized by categories such as alterations or carpentry, masonry, roofing, etc. In fact, I'll show you an even more general way that you can extend this. For example, US users might like to have CSI divisions and then subdivisions or categories to make it even more fine-grained. We'll also look at how you can add more fields, like cost or links to a document that describes the elements. In fact, this whole platform of the specifications report can have as much information as you find useful. I'll also share with you a shortcut that will allow you to use the info box and the tags and categories area for your elements to add this information without having to go into, let's say, the wall settings and the IFC properties subdialogues. It speeds up the workflow tremendously. So stay tuned. I'll be back with another installment of the ArchiCAD video tutorial on optimizing specifications and annotation using IFC data fields. This has been Bobrow. Thanks for watching.